Hello, everyone. My name's Hank Setala,
And I'm Dr. K.
and we're here with another episode of Holistic Highlights. Hello, everyone. And first, my apologies. Last week we weren't here because I forgot what I had to do, but I couldn't be on, and I even forgot to post a notice to say that we won't be on. But we're here. But we're here now.
I had two messages and they were like, I guess you didn't do your live. I'm like, no, Hank forgot to post the banner saying to be continued next week.
And I even, anyway, I'm bad with stuff like that sometimes, but we're here now.
We'll
And
forgive you.
though we do have a general focus of our conversation, which I believe today is Leaky Gut, if I got that right, we can go off topic and we can answer any questions that are on your mind. I come from more of the shamanic energy worker. Well, Dr. K is also an energy worker, but she's more functional medicine, and I'm more on the realm of shamanism, and we complement each other well with the different things that come out during the conversation. So, where should we start with leaky gut, or do we want to start with something else?
No, we'll start with leaky gut and then see how we progress. But I feel like lately we've been hitting some really big topics, and this is another one that's big. It's just another heavy loaded one. So, leaky gut, let's see, it's still a mystery. So I just want to start with saying that leaky gut, we've just really, it's just come out probably like a decade ago, about 10 years ago, where we really started talking about leaky gut. 20, 30 years ago, nobody was talking about this.
In fact, some
Nobody,
people don't even recognize it as a real thing, if I remember
correct.
right. Yeah,
Yep,
just like
medical
fibromyalgia.
doctors, yep, medical doctors don't even consider this to be, a medical condition. I actually even had to write myself some notes. So the digestive process is such a miraculous process. I mean, just think about it. You eat food, somehow it goes down in here and into this container where it gets turned into a liquid. And then from there, these little villi and things absorb things, and then it goes through your intestine, small intestine, large intestine, and out it goes, like through our poop, like how does that happen? That's, to me, just tells you how miraculous the body is and how the divine created this. And it's just, to me, it's just fascinating. So I don't know the doctors, even with all the medicine and studies, I don't know that we really have a really good understanding of what happens during the digestive process and what occurs. But digestion is, a key foundation of your health. So when they talk, this is one of the first places that I look, because I always tell people, if your gut's not working right, nothing's working right. Your gut does such an enormous amount, and we're continuing to learn more and more. For your body, it is really where everything happens, and so it is really the key foundation of your health. So if your gut's off to our best of our understanding, then a lot of things are going to be off. And Hank is correct. There's a lot of traditional medicine that doesn't fully understand it and doesn't really believe that this is a scenario. So we'll go over the digestive system as best as I can, as simply as I can, because it becomes very complicated. So we can just get a gist of what goes on. But your digestive system it consists of your stomach, it consists of your small intestine, it consists of your large intestine, it consists of your pancreas, it consists of your liver and gallbladder. So it's that whole thing, that whole big thing in the middle of your gut. So there's a lot of things that happen and parts and pieces that happen. The digestive system's main purpose is really to absorb nutrients and expel toxins, and it's a part of your immunity. But the other thing that I really want to touch on, because I think it's super important, it also holds your digestive system, and your gut holds a life force energy of its own. So there's a spiritual and metaphysical component to all of this. And a lot of enlightened beings really take focus on eating slowly, chewing properly, like 30 times. I say chewing your food 30 times in your mouth before it, and your mouth is part of your digestion too. Digestion actually starts in your mouth. But being mindful and praying over your food, this is why we do this, because it's important. So if this is a place, you want to chime in, Hank, you can.
Well, when it just comes over, Casey told the story on one of our episodes that there was I forget which country, but it was very customary when you come in, like you share like a sip of water or a drink of water, and a holy man was coming to this house, and this lady handed him water. He's like, I'm not drinking that, and she took a great offense to it. And the story goes back and forth a bit, and he ended up doing some energy work over the water. He had her taste it before and then taste it after. She's like, oh my gosh, I get it now. I understand why you wouldn't drink it. So just like one little example of how just a little bit of intention at the beginning before eating a meal can have a huge impact on,
Huge.
especially if you're eating meat products and things that might have a little, might not have had an easy time getting to your plate. You know?
Yep.
So,
Absolutely. So I always back everything up is that everything contains an energy. We talked about that already. So foods contain an energy. So absolutely, if an animal was not treated well, it's absorbing that energy while it's being, going through its process. We'll leave it at that, and then we're ingesting that same energy. So even though we don't see this, it is happening. So, that's why they call it gut intuition, because much of the human spirit is actually held in the gut, in the solar plexus. And so that's so miraculous to me. That's why, the whole gut instinct, gut intuition, that's where you hold a lot of your stress energy is in your solar plexus, in that centerpiece where your stomach is. So sometimes just clearing the energy out of that area resolves gut issues. I have had probably 3 or 4 people already that all I did was a few energy sessions, and the stomach pain went away. And I mean, we still did a few tests just to rule things out, but they had gone and had $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 worth of scopes, and the doctors, you put them on this, you need to see a gastroenterologist, and nothing's resolving. And they were tired of it. And I said, let's just start. I always start with a clearing session and a couple of clearing sessions because of the energy piece. Because as we clear the energy around the body can heal faster. Medications can work better. Supplements can work better.
right.
We're congested. We're just
And though
congested, folks.
we're talking about the physical gut, but in shamanism, there's a technique called the huchinikwi, and it is a process of bringing energy in and you digesting it. And I wouldn't recommend everybody do that, but some people do this quite naturally, like empaths. They might be bringing energy in, and I wonder if the same process happens energetically, of where emotions and other energies might be broken down. Just a theory, yeah.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with that. I think I call it congestion. That's kind of where things are on the outside and they start to work their way inside. And I always say, when you have gut problems, what is it that you don't want to digest? What is it in your life that you don't want to deal with, that's uncomfortable, that you don't want to swallow, that you don't? So it can have multiple areas where it has implications. The thyroid, maybe that's another one we need to talk about. Loaded topics. But a lot of worry sits in the thyroid. This is where we make decisions from the thyroid. So if we have congestion here and we worry a lot and we're having a lot of, we don't speak our truth, you better believe that energy, like Hank says it will internalize and it will start to create problems.
Yeah.
So
in the Peruvian tradition I practice, they say that say something unresolved from childhood, it might have a certain frequency to it, and it's like tinting your aura with a certain frequency, and anything that matches that frequency, it's like your unconscious permission for it to come into your bubble. And so if you don't deal with these things, it can start to amplify and get worse over time because you're not dealing with it, and everything that matches that energy you also don't want to deal with, and it keeps getting bigger and bigger until it can manifest physically like leaky gut or some other issues.
Exactly. And that's the part the doctors know, they just don't talk about this. Even though I'm all into the functional medicine, I'm realizing more and more that people still go to functional medicine doctors and they get a little bit of improvement. But why are they're not getting 100% improvement? Because there's another component. There's always this, energetic component of this emotional component, as I call it. I put it under the umbrella of stress. What stress factor? And people say, I don't have any stress. And then we start digging, and then it's, I don't like my mother-in-law, or my job really stinks, or I was abused when I was younger. All that stuff has been internalized, guys. And over time, things compile, or it gets triggered by something or someone. And if you're not cleaning it out, it very possibly works its way in, and then you have a physical condition. And that's really how the process works.
And the thing is, we are conditioned to put up with stress, because the whole definition of our corporate efficiency is how can I get the most out of somebody and put the least into them. And you perform better when you're stressed and you're worried about losing your job or all these things. And it's so normalized that we have a very high tolerance level for stress before we notice that we're stressed. Because like you're in your example, he didn't even know he had stress. But when you start digging, it's like, well, all this stuff is stress, but they weren't recognizing it as such.
Correct. We
Yep.
don't, we don't. We're not really attuned to recognize what this does. And unless you've done some energy training and you kind of get a little bit of a gist of, oh my gosh, this is what it can do to me. Some people are even not at that level of awareness. So I'm hoping maybe this opens a little bit of an eye to people. If you've tried multiple things and something's not working, we may need to just do a couple clearings and that resolves the issue.
Yep.
So this to me is a big factor. So,
Yep. We
but
had Mark chiming and just saying, "This is amazing info. Thank you for sharing with us. You're
oh, you're
very
so
welcome."
welcome, Mark. He's great. He's always on. So poor gut health can hinder intuition, by the way. I don't know if you want to, I guess, chime in
Well,
if
yeah,
you agree with that.
it hinders intuition in the sense that if you're not dealing with energies as they come through and everything, and it's accumulating in there, when you have awarenesses and gut instincts, it's really hard to distinguish, well, what am I really aware of that is happening now versus what am I aware of that I've picked up along the way. And if you when you clear all that stuff out, now you have a very clear distinction of what's happening now versus, like, it's kind of like finding a needle in a haystack. Your intuition's in that haystack, but you have so much other stuff piled on top of it that
Exactly.
it's not that you couldn't access it, but you got to dig to find what's a real intuitive hit in this moment versus what have I just picked up as an empath along the way.
Right. Absolutely. So it's an interesting thing. And then by that time, I think the interesting piece is, like you said, Hank, some people are not even at that awareness. And by the time, I don't know that they ever get to that awareness. So I'm hoping that our session here at least brings awareness to go, let me just look inside and see what it is I've been dealing with or haven't been dealing with that may potentially be implicating me, because some people go along, don't realize that they are on adrenaline rushes and all these things, and then, oh, the stomach starts hurting, oh, and then we're going to go to the doctor and make sure, that, okay, well, you have acid reflux, here's a Prilosec or whatever, they Nexium.
Right.
Okay, I'll take that. Okay, it's a little bit better. You haven't dealt with the underlying issue. So
And
yeah,
Leaky Gut is sneaky because it's not like it has a lot of different ways that it could present itself.
yes.
And I know, like, I see a lot of clients who I just feel like I can't. It just feels like a tightness, and it feels almost like not an allergy, but they have a sensitivity to something they're eating. And I know, like, leaky gut can cause that, where you have, like, well, just things that you wouldn't normally be sensitive to, like wheat, for example, or something else. Now all of a sudden you are, and it causes like a bloated sensation.
Right.
And it's a real subtle thing. Or they get sugar cravings, so that might be candida too. But you like they might even affect what foods that you're craving because it wants to be fed.
Yeah, the sugar cravings is interesting. It's actually parasites can cause sugar cravings too. Pathogens want to be fed, and how are they? What do they love? They love toxins and they love processed sugar. So, there's various theories there. Like a lack of calcium, you can get sugar cravings, but pathogens really need to be fed by something, and this is one of those things that they like. So, yeah, that's an indicator you could have something going on in there. So it's really, at the end of the day, it's trying to hit all these points and see which, okay, it isn't this, it isn't this, it isn't this. Sometimes it's very simple, sometimes it's a little more challenging, but energy is just a huge piece. And these pathogens actually also increase your stress energy. So it becomes a vicious cycle,
Oh, fun thing that just occurred to me in Peru, one of the first things they do for a baby is there's this energy center at the navel. They call it a Cusco, which is just means like the center, or just like the center of Cusco. It's like where the epicenter where everything meets. But they say that in the north we walk around with leaking navels because one of the things they do for their kids is they do an energy process to close this eye. It's like an eye of energy, like a camera lens,
Oh,
how it
that's
opens and closes.
fascinating.
And it's how the Nawis, unlike chakras, are how we bring in and express energy out of our field. And when the baby's born, they do a thing to close them off so they're not just overwhelmed with everything. And so when we're talking about leaky gut, it just dawned on me, well, is that like the energetic version of leaky gut for empaths? Like they're
So
just wide open,
you
just
have all
bringing in
these
anything.
this all information that I have never heard of. So it's, well, maybe I've heard of that. That sounds familiar with all these
Well,
extra pieces.
yeah. So it's like leaky gut, leaky Nawi.
Well, we
Maybe
don't
that goes
ever,
hand in hand.
yeah. There's so many things to leaky gut. I can give you the energetic piece, and Hank has some pieces, but modern medicine and even, functional medicine only gets so far with leaky gut too. It's like, how come the leaky gut's not healing? If where some people heal really well, so how come some others don't? So getting to more of the, I guess, the anatomical pieces, there's about 75 to 125 trillion bacteria that reside in your whole overall gut system. That's a lot. So this opens the door to infection. It opens the door to, or by toxic, exposures, bacteria, microbes, yeast, mold, fungus, mycotoxins, viruses. All these things are living symbiotically with us. And when they get out of, one of these things gets out of hand, that's when the problems start. So how do they get out of hand? Well, I think it's the energy piece and people eating poorly. I mean, it's not just that.
And people who are on long-term antibiotics that
Oh
kills
yeah, we'll talk
antibiotics
about that.
kill every. Okay, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but
He's getting excited. Hank knows about this, so he's getting
well, no,
excited.
well, I had a personal. Well, we talked about it in other topics before, where my dad was in the hospital, long-term antibiotics, and I started to bring something up, and the doctor just shut me down right away because of a study that, after researching it, was total BS. Anyhow, but anyway, so it's really good to just educate yourself on if you're going to be on a lot of antibiotics, like what can you do to make sure you stay healthy and stay balanced afterwards.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. That's meds in general wreak havoc on the stomach, absolute havoc. So we'll talk about that. But there's basically three different types of leaky gut. There's the true conventional medical leaky gut that happens, and this is defined by your regular, traditional medicine. That's your typical one where there's, bacterial strains such as E. coli that create pockets, and C. diff, which is something you get from taking too much of a certain antibiotic. And if you're weak, you can't fight that. C. diff, C. difficile. It's a bacteria that kind of gets in and burrows in your stomach, creates lots of problems in megacolon, or from hemorrhages, like if you're bleeding, or surprisingly too, you have to be careful if you're getting colonoscopies and all these scopes. There's a chance of perforation, and that creates a little hole where these bacteria can kind of burrow, create a pocket, and get out of control. These are traditional, your typical explanations of regular traditional medicine. Then there's the second explanation, which is now based on more functional medicine, and this is where we functional medicine folks get excited. We've come up with candida overgrowth, and this is the alternative explanation of, hey, something else, this is a real thing, something is going on in there. We have this yeast overgrowth, and other unproductive bacteria that are burrowing and creating pockets in the intestine. And basically microtoxins then start to, as they create these pockets, microtoxins can leak through and get into the bloodstream. And we'll kind of talk about that because I think I don't know if people have an understanding of that, but that's the really key piece. And then there's the third explanation. And this is why so many people are being told, you got leaky gut, you've got Crohn's, you've got IBS, you've got, whatever, everything that falls under the gut issues. But the third one is ammonia permeability. And this is, I think, to me, makes the most sense because unless you've had a scope or somebody's gotten in there, you've, had a bad bacterial infection or something has caused this one on the day-to-day makes the most sense to me. And this is, the ammonia permeability. So the key factor here is hydrochloric acid production. So obviously, if anybody's vomited, you throw things up, it's nasty. It is strong, it's burning. You have hydrochloric acid that gets produced in your stomach by certain cells to break down food, because obviously we chew our food in our mouth, then it goes down the esophagus and into the stomach where it has to be further broken down into a liquid so the body can absorb it. To do that, you have to have enough level of hydrochloric acid. If you don't, you're basically not digesting food really well, and it sits in your gut, which is your stomach is a storage place for a while, where it sits for 2 hours and kind of mixes. And think about the particles that don't get digested kind of sit there, and you get a byproduct of putrefaction of ammonia. So it's a gas that ends up leaking into the system through almost kind of like it's a really fascinating process, like a transport. It merges in. It's really, the body's just fascinating. And then that's what starts to make people sick. So you start to have this food that's sitting there undigested, and over time builds up, and voila, you've got an issue because you're not digesting.
And we do have a question from Jesse. What kind of doctor are you guys? Well, I am not a doctor. I am a aromatherapist and I am a shaman. And I'm speaking more from the energetic or more metaphysical side. And Dr. K can speak to her background.
Yeah, so I am a foot and ankle surgeon by training. I went on to get a certification in functional medicine Cleveland Clinic has a functional medicine program. It's a year to see anybody there. More and more people are catching on to the functional medicine. It's the new wave of looking more at the root causes of conditions. And I'm also certified in quantum biofeedback therapies, as well as homeopathic consulting and energy mastery. So I have a combination of certifications, but as well as a full medical degree. I did a four-year medical school with a 3-year residency. So hope that answers
a lot
the
of
question.
schooling.
That's too long. I would never do it again. I mean, it was fun to learn. Don't get me wrong. It was great. And I'm grateful and blessed that I've been able to look in a cadaver and look into people, be under the microscope and see what goes on, because it is just, I mean, it is fascinating.
And she has a follow-up question. She's curious if you could speak a little bit more on what energy mastery is, and it sounds interesting.
Yeah, so energy mastery is basically energy healing, and so there's a specific. I have a protocol pretty much for every condition. I have a technique that I use for every single thing that somebody may come in for. For instance, anxiety or ear problems or migraines, so I have a specific protocol that I use, really just using my hand and sometimes a crystal too, because we are energetic beings. I think we discussed that at one of our other, a simple way to understand this: if you walked across a carpet and got zinged, something's causing that. Some sort of electrical property has interacted with you and the carpet to create a zing. So we have a field around us. Some people call it an aura, whatever you want to call it. We have an electromagnetic property. So there's 2 ways I kind of deal with that, either through my biofeedback device, which gives me clues on what's going on in the body. And if Jesse wants to go back to, I don't even know how many episodes that was now.
Yeah, but there's a she hooks me up virtually to this machine, and we go through, and she's just telling me all this stuff, and I got a lot of validations because I used to work at a hardware store when there was a lot of pesticides, and that was coming up on the machine. So the biofeedback sends out all these frequencies and things that pick up our resonance with the frequencies that they know are representative of certain things. The machine gets that feedback, and then that gives the clues as to what's going on in the body and the energy field. So it's all scientific based, and it's an FDA.
That's scientific based. Yes. But the energy piece that's really something I just use my hands.
Yeah.
If you want to look into pranic healing, that has a base of there, and it's used in multiple states. Unfortunately, not so much in Ohio, but it's used in India a lot. There's research studies on how they've used this in conjunction with pulmonary issues, and it's improved the person's condition and helped them heal faster. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. And if you want to see all the past episodes, like if you go back through our Facebook, it's going to be harder to find everything because it's really spread out with other posts. But if you go to the Holistic Health and Healing YouTube channel, there is a playlist just with holistic highlights where it's me and Dr. K talking about all kinds of different things.
Yeah, and you can see the device there. We have it, so you can see what it's pulling up.
Yeah, she was curious if that can be used to treat vision problems as well.
Yes.
There'll
be another topic.
pretty much everything is.
It can handle everything. Yeah. So back to the hydrochloric acid. So hydrochloric acid, we all produce hydrochloric acid, but the caveat is, after about the age of 55 to 60, we start to produce a little less hydrochloric acid. So we have to be careful of that. The other thing that affects the amount of hydrochloric acid we produce is stress, eating under pressure, medications. Medications wreak absolute havoc on the gut and the production of, and we'll start getting into the gut and the layers and what it does, but meds wreak absolute havoc on the stomach, any kind of medications, antibiotics, immunosuppressant medications, anything you can think of. I have a client that I'm working with now that I had to back things way up because she's on a handful of medications, having major stomach problems. She's gone to multiple doctors, and things, she'll get better, but she hasn't resolved. And I said, let's back way up and look at all of your medications. We spent an hour just looking at the medications and side effects of the medications and how they may interact with each other. And 3 of them had, let's see, it was constipation, abdominal pain, and increased appetite as a side effect, as a very common side effect. So I said, we really need to ask your doctor if you can get off of some of these to see, because it's going to be very tough to heal if we keep putting this junk back on. So if you don't need to be on these and they're just preventative, let's see if we can maybe get you off of these and your stomach might start to heal then. because if I'm trying to heal, but we're putting the toxin or whatever nasty back onto the area, then we only get so far with that. The other thing that aggravates hydrochloric acid is foods that combine sugar and fat. So, for instance, like you eat cheese and ice cream. I don't know who would eat that together, but a steak and then you have a bunch of ice cream after, or a big dessert. If that's something that's done really consistently, that's going to affect stomach acid as well. So again, this is the biggest, I think, right where your stomach is. So it's kind of up by your chest a little bit is where the stomach actually starts. Um, that's where a lot of the initiation of problems start to begin. So this putrefaction of this gut rot, as I call it, is the ammonia gas that leaks into the bloodstream by this transference process, and um, it starts to diminish. It causes problems, and your HCl, your hydrochloric acid, starts to diminish, and other bad acids start to kind of come up. So the other thing, if you start feeling like, if you're coughing a lot and you're feeling mucus come up, that's another way to maybe a little bit of an indicator that your hydrochloric acid may be off, because your body's trying to protect itself by creating more mucus to line to protect from all these, rogue acids that are creating a problem. And there's various ways to test for how well your hydrochloric acid production is working. There is an actual test where you swallow a capsule, and it's like it has to be done in a doctor's office. I've never done it, and I don't do it, but you swallow a capsule and it almost sends like a signal to a Wi-Fi, to like a computer, to measure the exact quantities and how is your hydrochloric acid being produced, because your hydrochloric acid will start to digest this capsule. That's kind of a
This
nasty
seems like so
process.
sci-fi, but that's the age we're living in.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
yeah. Or I think in the older stages, there was somebody that did tell me that it had a string, and so they pulled it out. And I was like, oh, that's really, but yeah, that's uncomfortable. They said it wasn't that bad, but I'm like, I don't know.
Reminds me of
But
something I saw from a Matrix movie once. I'll pass.
most people don't go that route. The other way to kind of test is there's something called hydrochloric acid, HCl tablets. And if you're figuring that you may have a hydrochloric acid issue, you take one tablet, see if you get a burn. If no, go on to 2 tablets, see if you get a burn. If no, go 3 tablets, see if you get a burn, until you get a burn. And you should be at around 2 to 3 tablets. And if you're not getting a burn in your gut after that, then you're going on 6, 7, 8 tablets. Your hydrochloric acid is really off. And so we kind of have an idea there. We can supplement hydrochloric acid, but there's actually a lot of different acids that, there's a lot of variations of hydrochloric acid to help. But that's that. So I think that's the biggest place where things start. Going into how digestion works. Digestion actually starts in the mouth, or actually it starts in the head. As soon as you smell food, your brain is already sending signals to the GI tract to say, hey, start the engine running, because I think we're going to start eating. And then you put food in your mouth, and in the mouth, we actually have 2 enzymes that start breaking down food, and that's amylase, and that breaks down your carbohydrates into sugar, and your saliva has an linguinol lipase, and that breaks down fats. So it basically starts preparing things as it goes down, and it'll go down through your esophagus, then it hits the stomach, and the stomach, and it has a sphincter. That's the other thing that's interesting. So at the end of your esophagus, which is this long tube, and there's an esophageal sphincter, so it looks like this circle, and it'll open and close, based on how much hydrochloric acid you're producing. So a lot of times what happens is at night, people say, well, I wake up in the middle of the night and I have this acid reflux thing happening. It's going to close if there's too much hydrochloric acid. If there's not enough hydrochloric acid, it stays partially open, meaning some of that acid can sneak back up, because the body's like, okay, well, it's not that much acid. So, so a lot of times when people go to bed at night, they wake up in the middle of the night with a little bit of acidic feeling. So that's another indicator something's either wrong with the sphincter, that it's not opening and closing, or a hydrochloric acid issue. Anyway, moving down from the esophagus into the stomach, it's a temporary storage. So the food will move down, it'll sit there for 2 hours, it's like what what do they call the slushy machines that just kind of, you know, make
I don't know.
that's
There's an official name for it, but I get what you're saying.
slushy machine. There is a name.
I'm
Oh,
sure there is.
anyway.
I've never had to
But
describe
you've
it.
watched it where
Yeah,
slushies are made and it's
or like
just
how
kind
a
of,
cement mixer keeps everything moving while
right.
it's
It just keeps
while it's going.
everything moving. And from there, in your stomach has five regions: the cardia, the fundus, the antrum, which houses the food, the area where the food kind of gets to and kind of sits, and then the end piece, which is the pylorus. And the pylorus is where it has another little opening, little doorway that's connected to your small intestine. But the stomach has four layers, and basically, I'm not going to get into the layers and then the cells because that's just going to get too complicated for people. But the mucosa layer, which is one of the layers, it has the cells that produce the hydrochloric acid and some digestive enzymes, as well as gastrin, to help stimulate some of these enzymes to break down the food into a liquid. The body cannot absorb a chunk of chicken; it just can't. You have to break this down into I don't know what it would look like a protein shake, maybe. That's probably the consistency, or if not thinner than that.
You know
So,
what comes up for me? Have you ever read? Well, I'm vegan, so I don't have to worry about eating this anymore. But I saw this ingredient once, and then I looked it up. It's called mechanically separated chicken, and I picture like chickens going down a conveyor belt, getting like ripped apart by little fingers. But
oh,
it's like
it's
this chemical
terrible,
process
Hank.
where they take. Well, I didn't know, but I guess they take all the parts that are left over, add some sort of chemical to it, and it gets pushed through this press, and it comes out like this foamy, like liquid stuff, and that's kind of visual I get when you're talking about that.
Well, that's
So,
kind of what happens in a
yeah,
way.
yeah.
Yeah,
They just
because
created the digestive process mechanically and put it into Slim Jims.
yeah, pretty much, pretty much. um, but the stomach really doesn't do a whole lot of absorption. It's just like a storage area. What it absorbs is a little bit of water, alcohol. So if you're wondering where your alcohol gets absorbed when you drink it, that's where the stomach does it. That's where it absorbs alcohol and some medications. So that's what happens in the stomach. Once it sits there for 2 hours and things or more, then it will go on to the small intestine. So the small intestine is fascinating to me. It is 20 feet long. Like that's like if you were to stretch it out, 20 feet. 20 feet is sitting in your stomach. Like what a miracle. Like that's to me amazing. And this is where a lot of the big stuff occurs. This is where 90% of the digestion occurs of vitamins, minerals, proteins, fats, and also the stomach does produce a little bit of vitamin B12 as well. So that will move on through. But this is where all the conditions occur. This is really when we talk about leaky gut. This is pretty much where it happens for the most part. And this is where there's a condition called SIBO. Many people may have heard of SIBO, and that's small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. This is where the mess starts. I'm not a SIBO specialist. It's a beast in its own that they still can't figure out, really. Um, but this is where the mess starts in the gut. So, so the small intestine has three parts. It has the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum. So these are all my technical terms. And this is where in the duodenum, the first part of it is where your pancreas and your liver and your gallbladder they kind of shoot enzymes in and bile and all these things to help the digestive system move through as the food is now in a liquid form. Vitamins A, D, E, and K get absorbed here with fat. So I always tell people when you're taking vitamin D, make sure you take it with a fat. It'll help it absorb better. So like, you know, nuts or almond butter or something like that to help. And I mean, I don't want to tell you to eat a steak, but so, but with some sort of a fat avocado, that would be great. It just helps it digest and get absorbed better in the small intestine. Um, Iron gets absorbed in the duodenum as well, that first part, and vitamin B12 actually gets absorbed, further reabsorbed in the ileum, which is the end. So what happens in the small intestine is it's another miraculous little process. In the lining of the mucosa, they have these little things called villi, and they look like little fingers. They look like a little brush border. And then it gets really intricate into the cells in a transport process. So these villi kind of go back and forth, and they'll pick stuff up and they'll draw it in, and then there's certain cells that it passes through this electron transport system, which is it literally like, I don't know how to describe it, but miraculous. It's like in thin air, it'll just permeate through. That's where the whole biochemical process starts. But this is if these, and then they have cells that are called, that have tight junctions. So certain cells in there, they're only allowed to let certain things pass. If those cells are damaged or having an issue, or bacteria implicating them, or toxins are implicating them, then they get wider and things can start passing through. And this is where it passes through and gets into the bloodstream. So if you're wondering how your nutrients get absorbed, this is where it all happens. This is really where 90% of it starts getting into the bloodstream. And this is where you have toxicity and all this other nonsense that starts happening. So somebody had messaged me, I did another little video, and they messaged me about obstruction and what it does. Does leaky gut play a role in obstruction? This is where obstruction happens. And what does that mean? That means the intestine gets twisted where things can't pass through, or having a really hard time. It's, I think, it's partially responsible, not 100%. Obstruction occurs because of parasites, which that's where it plays a role. An external pressure process, Crohn's disease, hernias, ischemia, those sorts of things are really what are implicative of an obstruction where the intestines are twisted and things can't get through. So then we will move on to the large intestine, and that also has three parts. That has that move through your colon. I'm not going to get through those because that gets too scientific, but in the large intestine, what happens here? It's recovery of basically your water. So if you notice, sometimes if you gulp water too fast, too much, you get diarrhea because it came in through fast, it couldn't reabsorb, and it went through. So minerals get reabsorbed here, such as sodium and chloride. Electrolytes get absorbed here, and this is where your poop, your feces get stored until it gets expelled. So this is another area where there's actually 500 different species, 500 million different species of bacteria. So, and this is important because some of these bacteria ferment undigested food and convert them into small chain fatty acids, which are really important for us because small chain fatty acids create our energy, and it creates energy for the bacteria and for the cell. So that's the digestive process in a nutshell. And that's just the rim of it. If you get into the cellular function, it's just fascinating. So
That's what I was going to ask. So when it comes to like leaky gut, like it's just an overpopulation of bad bacteria.
Correct.
Exactly. If I'm understanding correctly.
Correct.
Putting it down into layman's term, shaman terms, so we can.
Yes. So leaky gut meaning, like we talked about, that's the big point here. Leaky gut meaning in this small intestine area, and maybe a little bit partially in your stomach, where things burrow and create little holes in the villi, those little cells that move back and forth, where there's a malfunction there and it gets into the bloodstream. That's what they mean by leaky. So it's something's leaking into the bloodstream that doesn't belong. Undigested particles, something, bacteria, solvents, all those things. So when we have, this is where it gets a little tricky to explain, because if there were actual holes, like big holes in your stomach and in your small intestine, then you'd have the really traditional medical case of leaky gut, because you would get really sick. You would get really, really sick.
If you think of it like a coffee filter stops the coffee from flowing through, but liquids and other things can get through. So if there were small enough holes, it would allow for some transport, but not all.
Correct. But if you had an actual hole in your intestine, as many of you know, you'll end up in the hospital. You'll get a fever. This does not belong. You're getting toxins. You're getting poop crawling out that doesn't belong, and it's in the bloodstream. That is the true medical case, like we discussed initially, the three different kinds of leaky gut. This is more of a cellular, these cells that have these called tight junctions. They're like soldiers that don't let you get through. When they get weak, there's certain things that pass into the bloodstream that kind of don't belong. The bacteria, do certain things. They're overpopulated. They're creating little burrows in part of the lining, not creating full holes, but they're creating byproducts. So we don't have a really great understanding, but this is in a nutshell as much as we know. So the gut bacteria actually interact with our immune system. So that's, really important. They produce vitamin K, they produce biotin, and they actually stimulate the release of certain hormones that are involved in storage of fat. So this is where they've recently termed and coined this term, the gut is the second brain. because they're starting to realize that there's, this vast interactive nervous function in the gut that actually sends signals to the brain independently to stimulate hormones that are capable of, producing, well, they produce serotonin. A lot of serotonin is produced, and dopamine is produced in the small intestine. So this is the latest of where you're hearing the second brain, that the small intestine can actually almost function independently because they're finding these enteric nerves that are kind of almost functioning on their own. And it kind of makes sense if you think of the brain and how it looks. If you've ever seen the brain, I'm sure you have, and how your small intestine looks, go look it up. They look really similar. So it's kind of fascinating, but we're just starting to kind of get on this journey of really understanding. Um, as modern
Yeah.
medicine still doesn't really recognize it,
So
but
now,
it's
if
fascinating.
someone feels that they do have leaky gut going on, what would be some things they, well, of course, call Dr. K and see what he can do for you, right? But uh, but if, like, say they're in a position that they can't, like, what would one do if you feel like you
Yep,
have to get the gut into good health, whether you have leaky gut or not? What are things that we could do to put it in check, if you will?
yep. This is where I'm moving next. Is really the hydrochloric acid. I
Let's bring
think
the
is key.
segue for you.
He's like reading my mind today. This is, yeah. Well, Hank's running the show. He's hearing me. um,
Not like I'm
so
psychic.
he's like, well, we are. We all are.
Yeah, we all are.
So the hydrochloric acid, making sure that you have enough hydrochloric acid. And if you're feeling that you're having a tough time digesting things, digestive enzymes are great, and I use specific ones. So if you're wanting that, just make sure you message me. I can talk you through some of that. Making sure you're getting digestive enzymes. But food is the key to anything. Food is energy medicine. Food is all. So processed sugar, cutting out processed sugar, cutting out soy, cutting out dairy, cutting out red meat. People might not like me after this. Cutting out red meat, cutting out gluten, minimizing or even cut, if you're really sick and you're having a digestive issue, maybe even cutting out eggs give it a month, see how you do, because eggs tend to increase bacterial growth, increase viral growth. I'm on the fence about that. I'm still tinkering with it, but if you're really having issues, maybe even cut out eggs completely. Cutting out anything genetically modified, GMO, cutting out corn, cutting out farmed fish. Farmed fish has all kinds of
Yeah.
junk in it,
And
all kinds of
specifically,
junk.
just to give one example, salmon that's farm raised, if they don't feed it the right diet, instead of making omega 3s, it makes omega 6, which is a completely different effect and not wanted. So, like,
Yes,
if you are going to be eating fish and things, like, really research if it's farm raised, what kind of farm, what diet are they feeding them? Because you may not be getting what you think,
I would, yeah. I mean, if you want to do your research, great. If you want to take that time so you can get
or
a
just cut it
lower,
out.
or just cut
Doesn't
it
mean you'll
out.
never get to eat it again. Cutting it out while you're doing this is the thing. And then once you get back to a balance point, you can possibly reintroduce things depending
Right. So
on what's going
anything in the store that you see farm raised, if you're not feeling good, I would cut that one out. Nightshade foods, things like peppers can be really aggravating. Tomatoes can be really aggravating. With that said, everybody's DNA is different. This is another challenging topic because I have people that can eat tomatoes, have no problem. I have other people that eat tomatoes, I have a problem. So sometimes I do a food sensitivity test where we test against 189 different foods and see what your body's getting inflamed to if we don't know. And I have people that get inflamed to cherries, other people don't. So it gets to be a little challenging, but on a broad shade, just maybe avoid the nightshade foods, and that's like peppers, anything,
on.
underground.
Out of personal curiosity, have you ever done one of those food sensitivity tests before someone is really working on the leaky gut and after and seeing how that might shift?
Um, no, by the time they come to me, it's their leaky gut, and then we don't really retest. I haven't retested.
Um,
We just avoid those foods.
no, just curious because, yeah. Anyway, maybe we'll
Go
have a
ahead.
test someday in the future. Yeah, we'll
Oh,
see.
I thought you wanted to say something.
No,
Tap water. So we'll talk about tap water. That's halogens, fluoride, all that stuff that gets stuck in there. This is the other, and we'll get through this list and then I'll talk a little bit more about that. Artificial sweeteners. Citric acid can be very irritating. So look on the back of labels if something has citric acid. That could be, if you're irritated, that might be something you just want to avoid. Beer, wine, boy, I'm not going to have any fans after this. Xylitol, if you're chewing gum, if you're, Eating mince, if it has xylitol in it, that's something the body doesn't process well. Did you want to say
Is
something, Hank?
that's not the one? Is that the one that's all natural, made from like I can't
Yeah,
remember.
it's supposed to be like the all natural, the good thing, but
Oh,
when
because I
you're
have these like.
having
Oh,
stomach
I gotta check.
issues,
I will tell you,
xylitol and
I
sorbitol.
love these things. They're like ice chips, but I think they have xylitol's in it.
Yeah,
But they
that's
were
the
marketing it
natural.
as an all natural, like low calorie, well, very few calorie sweetener.
It is. It is. The body just has a tough time sometimes processing the xylitol. So if you're ill and you're having a lot of problems, that this is just one of those things. Let's just cut all these things out and see how your stomach does. It's just a suggestion. Xylitol, sorbitol, soda. Getting rid of soda. Soda's got an enormous amount of junk. So that's a long list. If you need to hear that again, just re-listen and write those things down. What can we do to heal the gut? Cutting out these toxic foods that we listed, reducing stress, adding digestive enzymes to your process, eating more good fats, and that's like, your avocados, almonds, increasing cardio activity, believe it or not. It just it gets the metabolic rate moving, and that's very helpful, and sleeping well. So for repair of the gut, it actually can be anywhere from 3 months to 2 years. So, um, so what can we do what other products can you use? L-glutamine is great it helps with ulcers. It's a powder form usually. It's tasteless. You can mix it in with drinks or your juice or whatever. Aloe is great at healing the stomach. You have to be a little careful with aloe though, because if you have too much of it, you can get diarrhea. But it's antimicrobial, and it heals the lining. So there's a handful of other things that I use. These are basics, but berberine is really good. That's a supplement. And celery juice. Celery juice is amazing. You actually have to get a juicer, and you will have to juice your celery because celery juice oxidizes if it sits for too long. But this will, over time, will help you replenish the hydrochloric acid. The other option is you take HCl tablets. So, but why not use food? Actual natural food is the best medicine. Eating things like broccoli, wild berries, papaya is great, gets motility going. It's almost like a natural enzyme. So if you get a papaya and you got to wait for it to ripen, but you can do a little bit of papaya every day. That's really good. Almonds are really great. Fiber is great too. The only challenge is for some reason they're noticing that if you have the small intestinal bacterial overgrowth situation, which is a whole topic in itself, but if you have a lot of gas, a lot of bloating after you eat, feel like you can't eat, feel like you're afraid to eat because it's going to upset your stomach, massive abdominal pain and bloating and gas and all these things constantly, like really uncomfortable, there's a very strong possibility that you could have either leaky gut or the small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. If you add fiber to somebody that has the SIBO, the situation will get worse. You'll feel worse. So you have to be really careful with, if you find that you eat a food that has a lot of fiber in it, or you take a fiber supplement and you feel worse, very strong chance you may have SIBO. But other than that, for leaky gut, increasing fiber is actually good. So things like asparagus, chicory root, garlic, jicama, and organic fruits, vegetables are actually quite helpful. So that's a lot. It's a lot. It's just a lot of talking today. The other big factor is toxins, and this is really what I focus on a lot now. A lot of toxins can actually settle in the stomach, in the small intestine. And where do we pick up toxins? All sorts of places. They lodge themselves in the liver, and they cause malfunctions everywhere. So that's one thing that I start to detoxify. Look at the stomach, but I start detoxifying because we almost all have it to some degree. Like amalgam fillings, for instance, if you've had those silver fillings in your mouth, and even if you've had them taken out, if they were not done by a biological dentist, which is a specialized dentist, you actually pull them back into your system, and they can settle in your intestinal lining, and then we have to get them out
That
because
does not sound
bacteria.
fun.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that doesn't sound fun at all.
Well, we have homeopathics that
Yeah.
we do things to force them out. It's not like we give injections or scoping or
Oh,
something
good.
like that. But toxins are big, and they sit in the liver and they cause malfunctions, and they sit in the stomach and cause malfunctions. So that's one thing that most doctors will never talk to you about. They don't even know about. Medications have a lot of heavy metals in them as well, like platinum, for instance. So that's a lot to deal with. But these are things, celery juice and cutting out some of these foods, reducing your stress are big places to start, big places to start, simple
Yeah.
places to start.
And from the physiological side too, there was a lady named Barbara Hero, and she did research on the healthy frequency of organs, including the stomach, small intestines, large intestines. And there's actually a tuning fork set. I know a guy who sells them if anybody needs it, but you can actually get the frequency in a tuning fork for what a healthy liver would resonate to and what a healthy large intestines would resonate to. And by using the frequencies, it causes sympathetic resonance, and it can help bring the organ into a healthy frequency state. So that's another little sound from the sound part of it. And then for the gut, there's a essential oil out of New Zealand called Fregonia. It comes from a bush. You can get that oil, mix it in with an unscented carrier cream, and just rub it into the abdomen. And that is really good for like an anti-fungal, candida, that type of thing. So it's a good complementary thing if you feel you're dealing with leaky gut and there might be a candida overgrowth. Just offering that and oregano and just one more tea tree. That combination would be really good.
Yep, those are all. So I think getting rid of the foods, number one. Number two, I would say look into the toxins, do the celery juice, get rid of the toxins. And then we have to restore the gut. And this is, I think, where the tuning forks and all these things would just be like amazing. We should do a study.
Yeah, why not?
Volunteers of leaky gut, let's clean them up and add the tuning forks and see how fast the body heals. I always look outside of the box. If you are not getting better, medicine is not all there. There's things outside of the box. There's a lot, personally for me, if somebody told me, oh, well, there's nothing more I can do, I don't even want to hear that line. I'm like, there's got to be something else that can be done. We are not designed to be sick.
Yeah. Then the question is, if you do have the physical manifestation of leaky gut, taking a step back, like Dr. K looks at all the energetic components, what's going on energetically that might have distilled down into this physical representation. And that's where if you're an empath, like asking the question, who does this belong to? There might be a lot of stuff energetically floating around that you're just aware of that you're taking in that's not even yours. And so while you're doing all this stuff, also look at the energetic component. What am I aware of that I'm not willing to acknowledge that the body's acknowledging for me? Because people who are intuitive that don't want to know that that person over there has cancer, but they are aware of it and they're pretending that they don't know, but the body still acknowledges that awareness and then it can manifest the stuff. So just starting to really honor your own awareness about things and making conscious choices instead of blind avoidances.
I think awareness is the biggest takeaway here, really. If you just at least gain awareness of all of these things we've talked about and just say, oh, okay, this isn't all there is, just going and having a colonoscopy and they tell you there's nothing more we can do and well, you have this. I just gain awareness that there may be this going on, there may be this energetic piece going on, maybe my hydrochloric acid isn't strong enough that it's causing problems way down the road, down the line, in the it's just gaining awareness of things you may have not heard of, may have not known of, not heard of, toxins, and heavy metals and mold. Another one, a whole other topic, mold toxicity. So there's a lot of stomach problems that actually start because of mold toxicity, and people have no idea. No idea.
That's why everybody should at least have a conversation with you, Dr. Fair minimum.
Just at least if this is information that at least you can go do your own research. You can research mycotoxins, you can research leaky gut, and at least this brings you to awareness to say, oh, maybe it's my hydrochloric acid. Maybe I need to cut out some of these foods that are agitating. Maybe, hey, I've been eating, a lot of, because I heard fiber is really good, so I'm eating a lot of this or that. That's high fiber food, taking my Metamucil, and I'm not any better, I'm worse. Well, then maybe there's something else we need to look into. And this is where I think the energetic piece ties in, because in my mind, why are SIBO patients not getting any better? I mean, it is really, you actually have to give an antibiotic such as rifaximin, which is very expensive, or there's a natural format we use. And it seems to, what I've been hearing is it seems to work for like a couple of weeks and then people have relapses. I'm like, if we've dealt with the source of the problem and we've killed off all the bacteria that were nasty, then unless that person goes back to eating a very poor diet, then why are people not getting better? These are always questions I ask myself, like, why are people not healing completely?
Because
Where
we need to heal the body, the being, and beyond. We're way more
exactly?
than just the body. And that was the other thing I wanted to add in too, that I had the awareness about 2 years ago. That's when I actually went mostly plant-based. I was taking a class, and in the class they were talking about how the body is a separate thing than the being, and gave exercises on how to tune in with the body. And when I started asking my body what it liked, I was in line at Chipotle. The doctor's heard this story before. I'm in line at Chipotle, and I asked my body, what would you like? And I was about to get my normal half carnitas, half barbacoa burrito bowl, and it's like energetically, of course, it's like not that. And like overnight, I went virtually all plant based, with just honey is technically isn't plant based, but I never knew how bad I felt until I started listening to my body, eating what it was directing me to eat, and my whole diet changed, and I felt so good. I was like, I didn't even know I felt bad before. But
Yeah,
what,
we're
what, what
not.
would it take to really be in tune with the body and start asking what it
Most
needs?
people don't even listen or pay attention. We live in such a fast-paced society that we don't even, we don't take the time to have the awareness. And I think this whole lockdown was a time where
Yeah,
we were given that opportunity to slow the heck down and be like, oh, maybe this wasn't so great, you
yeah.
know? So there's a lot that goes into this. And I tell people, if you're unwilling to make the changes, there's only so much I can do.
Well, then, if you're not willing to make the change, ask the question: what would it take for me to become willing and open up the door for the universe to bring you an experience that will shift you to a place? Because people want to get better, but sometimes they don't want to do the work. But then I started
Exactly.
Asking the question: well, what would it take for me to want to do the work? What could I bring into my, and you just start trying to shift that, and or not. Some people just don't want to shift. But when you talked about the COVID thing, I want to throw out my little acronym
I
because
love this.
yeah. So like Spirit gave me this, and COVID is an acronym for Create Opportunities via Intuiting Divinity, and that's really what hitting the pause button on the planet. So many of us were just sitting with just ourselves and our soul, and really getting in touch with and starting to reevaluate what's important in life, and and making changes, and now the whole world is experiencing this change because people really had a moment to just sit, be present, and start really waking up and making choices instead of reacting. So it's an exciting time. A little scary too, but exciting over most of it.
It is. Sometimes, but it a segue to, if you ask the universe, what am I willing to, that whole thing, sometimes the experience might not be pretty. Just,
Yeah.
sometimes it comes nicely, sometimes it doesn't. I look back now and I'm like, I want to understand. I don't understand why this is happening. Well, now I look back and I'm like, well, now I'm being given the opportunity to understand why that was
Well,
happening. And I'm
that
like,
is the one of the words I tell people to avoid actually in Access, because in the energy of understanding, if you say, I want to understand my parents, subconsciously you're sending out to the universe, actually consciously, just not realizing what you're doing, to create the experience that you will have that then will bring you awareness to why they made the choice they made. Where does it even matter if you understand them? Or whatever it is, like, do you need to understand it, or could you simply say, what could I choose to be in creationship to that, to create a different possibility? It doesn't matter the why behind it, or what could I do to create more with it, and then go in that direction. A little bit
yeah,
lighter for me anyway.
I learned that the hard way. So
Yeah,
about
yeah, because
10
you're
or
putting
15
yourself
years
underneath their
ago, I'm
energy,
like,
you're
I don't
understanding their.
understand why he's doing this to me. And now I'm having that experience and I'm like, oh,
The
okay,
same
now
thing
I
with the
get it.
question why. It's like a loop. You ask the universe, why did this happen? And you get another experience showing you why it happened, instead of what could I do differently to make a different change here? And like a totally different energy. Why is going to give you the same experience? What could I do to create something different? Totally different feel. So really watch the energy behind the words that you're using,
Words.
because
Oh
words are
yeah.
just words. Words point to an energy. What's the energy behind the words, and what are you creating with it? Why is not one of the ones you want to use.
Why and how? How spins the brain.
Yeah, well, how depends. Yeah, but yeah, in general, my go-to questions are: what else is possible? How does it get any better than this? And those two can create an upward spiral of possibility in your life if you just really sit with those questions. And whether you just stubbed your toe or you won the lottery, how does it get any better than this universe? And the universe gives you an opportunity to see how it can get better. And you just keep going with it, keep asking that question. And next thing you
Yep.
know, life has changed.
That is, yeah, we did, I think, a little segment on that, but words are your wand. They really are. So people don't even realize the reality they create with what they say.
Yeah, well, the word want actually means to lack. So if you say,
Yeah,
I want money, you're saying energetically, I lack money. Because rich people want for nothing, rich people lack for nothing. But we use it it's interchangeably with the word desire. Desire is something you would like to bring into your life, but want is an acknowledgement you don't have it. So really watch your words. Like the words are potent, and
They are.
the better, the more words you could use that are going to create more possibility in your life, the better, and avoid the bad ones.
And it totally works. It totally works. I've used it and it works. So
Cool.
that was a
Well,
lot. I guess everybody's quiet, so nobody has any questions.
well, I posted in the comments a link to Dr. K's website. My website is my name, just hanksetala.com. I'll put up my display. Actually, I don't know why the display names aren't showing. Oh, because I have an overlay up? I don't know. I don't know why it's not there, but it's hanksetala.com for me. Or if you just go to holistichealthandhealing.net, my practitioner page is there too. And we both have our own little things that we do, and we work really well together. So
yeah, and if you really want to know if you have leaky gut or SIBO, there is a test that I go through a Genova Diagnostics lab that we actually you have to do a stool sample, but you do everything at home. I send you the kit. You do everything at home, and you send it off, and it takes a few weeks to process, but it will spit out a really amazing report that tells you what's going on, and sometimes what we need to do really gets into beta-glucuronidase and calciprotectin and all these other things that are going on in the stomach. That's all scientific that we'd go over. So if you really kind of want to know, you can do that. It is covered by insurance. I don't know how much your insurance will cover. Everybody's plan is different, but there's two routes. We can either do a self-pay or run it through insurance. So if you're really having stomach issues and they're really bugging you, this is one of the ways to kind of, if you really want to know the details of your stomach, it will give you that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Do we have our topic for next week yet? I don't know. If
we don't. Where's your list?
I don't know. Well, if there's something you'd like us to talk about, make a comment.
We've hit some really big topics.
Yeah. And go back and watch the archive on the Holistic Health and Healing YouTube channel. There are a ton of great episodes and something for everyone. Mark was just saying, make it a great weekend, everyone. Thank you, Dr. K and Hank. You are very welcome. And he also mentioned, Mark mentioned, a discussion is chock full of great information. Thank you, guys. You are all welcome. It threw me off because they were both Mark. I thought it was the same person at first. But you guys are welcome. And if there's any suggested topics, and it can be more on the medical side or more on the metaphysical side, we can tackle any and everything. We even did like chronic healing processes one week. So
So if you want to know how, I think Jesse was asking, if I don't know if they were still on, but if you want to know the technique or how it works, how I heal, I did a little something on Hank. I didn't do a full protocol. It's a little more extensive, but it gives you a little process of untangling the mind, and then it releases things in the body, and then I do a whole very specific protocol with very specific chakras I hit.
And I don't know if I told you about that. On that day, it was really crazy because I was having some entity stuff happening, because in the morning, like one of my things jumped over my altar, and I had an awareness that someone might have passed and all that.
Oh yeah, you told me that.
Yeah, so like and I'll do it on purpose this time, but without me touching the thing, this kept happening. They would just go to my logo, and there was one part where all of a sudden I was just kicked out of the broadcast studio. Dr. K was by herself, and all my stuff was grayed out. Couldn't press any buttons, and that was the moment I had grabbed my phone to check to see if there was any post on Facebook about my friend. So after that, I take the dream catcher that had fallen, which was a gift that he had given me, and I go to my office and I put it in my little Mesa bundle. I would show it, but actually, I can grab it real quick. My Mesa bundle is this little guy. And there's 4 folds to this bundle. When you open it up, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then there's rocks in the middle. So I took it, I put the Dreamcatcher on the top, I put it underneath my massage table where I have my full Curandero Mesa spread out, and I went to lunch with Ryan. And when I came back, I grabbed the Mesa and the item and took this up like this, and out of the mouth of the Mesa, all the stones that are in the 4th fold just fell out onto the floor. And I'm like, how does that even happen? So I ended up adding that Dreamcatcher into my Mesa as one of my medicine pieces. But it was just it was a cool episode because there was all this entity stuff, and then there was like a little bit story to what was going on afterwards. Turns out my friend was alive, but he had moved to a remote area of Canada, didn't have internet, and he was compulsed that day, because I sent him a message on Facebook, but he hadn't been logged in for like over a year. So I'm like, I don't know what happened to him. And he was compulsed to drive to the city, get access to internet, check his Facebook, sees my message, and says, "Hey, I'm living in a remote area of Canada. Here's my address where you can write me." So like all of that just to connect us, and he has a lot of things that he's had a vision for self-sustainable communities and with what's going on in the world right now. It was like perfect timing for us to reconnect. So I believe all that was just to reconnect me and one of my original spiritual teachers.
That was awesome because all we did was release some. I think we talked to you were like angry, so we did the little magic box on
And I wasn't
something
even
about
angry. Like it was like
whatever
a
it was.
subset of it. Yeah, but we did that. But it was a wild broadcast because of the little things going on. And now with the backstory, you can look and have a little bit of another level of appreciation, knowing how it ended up afterwards. Because there's all kinds of other stuff that happened that day and that night. That was the day of the lunar eclipse, I believe. There was a big event. So I went out. We had a fire going, and the moon didn't come out till like 11:30 at night. So I was waiting because I built my mesa again. I redid everything underneath the light of the full moon. And for each one of the kuyas in the new medicine piece, you do what's called a kintu. And it was real cloudy that night, but every time I would hold up the leaves to connect with the upper world and bring the energy into the stones, that literally the cloud would go away, the moon would come out, the light would hit the stone and the kuya and the leaves.
Amazing.
And then I would put it down and the cloud would come back. And for that, for like 2 whole mesas, because I was building a new one, every single stone that happened, even my wife was like, is this really happening? Like every time you hold up these little leaves, the moon comes out. Every time you put the leaves down, the moon goes away. And so it's just like one of those interesting things. One following up for a question that I
The
may
tap
miss.
water.
Yeah, you were asking about tap water. I have one thing to add about aromatherapy and tap water too. But what were you going to mention about that?
The toxins that we have in tap water are that's where we talked about heavy metals and halogens and chlorides, and that's all in the family of fluorides. If your water is not filtered, then there's a lot of junk in tap water that's you're drinking that. It's settling in pockets in your stomach and in your
Even
intestine.
if you filter your water, like there was they found chromium-6 in the water supply here locally, and then they were asking, if you don't know chromium-6, if you go watch the movie Aaron Brockovich, that was all about chromium-6. It's a lubricant that's used in the water facilities. But anyhow,
carcinogen.
Yeah, it is definitely a big time carcinogen. And though it's not like to the Aaron Brockovich level here locally, they asked questions about like Brita water filters and some other water filters, and the company's responses were, it is inconclusive whether the filters help with this or not. And there's no way that could be inconclusive. You can test before and after. Is there or isn't there? So even if you have a filter, like it may not get out everything. I like getting like the big things, spring water, and getting something as research the source. And I use spring water for everything. But from an aromatherapy perspective, if you were to mix something for like a bug spray, for example, if you use tap water, your spray is only good for 24 hours or less, because the chemicals in the tap water break down the chemicals of essential oils, and then you have to make a new one. You have to use distilled water for essential oils, or spring water, but I would say distilled, because otherwise you don't know what's in there, and it messes up with the synergistic effect of the oils with whatever you're making.
Yeah, and think over time. If somebody's completely unaware of this and is drinking water, tap water over time, every day, drink more water. You need to drink more water. Person's drinking more water, and then they don't understand why they're getting sick or they're having brain fog. There's a lot of heavy metals. Don't forget, people flush medications down the water system. They flush all sorts of stuff. Where do you think
mercury
that goes?
light bulbs. Those little curlicue light bulbs with the fluorescent light. If you break one, you're supposed to like call the EPA and do all this stuff for cleanup, because there's mercury in it. And where do all these bulbs end up? They end up in the landfill breaking, and then over time that mercury gets into the water supply, and it's going to end up in the water table and back into your faucet. So there's all kinds of stuff. Spring water for me is the way to go and research the source. You can even get your own little test and check it out. Try to get something with a good high pH, because pH is that could be a topic in and of itself, as pH levels in the body. Because there's so many, if you have the right level pH, there's a lot of things you just don't have to worry about, because it doesn't exist in a high pH environment. But anyway, we're going to get so now we have our next topic. Maybe we'll talk about pH.
Yeah, we could. Yeah, it definitely I heard Berkey filter is really going to be the best, most advantageous. Even the filters in your fridge that you buy, the reverse osmosis ones, don't get everything either. It's better than nothing. But, a quick story on how much time we have. But when I was at my old office, when I was at Premier Physicians, we made coffee, and my assistant just always used the tap water. And the one day I filled it up in a cup, and I'm looking, and there's these like little metal pieces floating around. I'm like, what is this? And talked to the maintenance guy and he really didn't have an answer, but I'm like, here's a pure example of God knows what is being filtered through that area. And she didn't even think twice of it. I happened to look and she's making coffee with it every single day. And I'm like, these things settle in your gut and they create problems. And there's also, if you're wondering what your metal toxicity level is, your mycotoxin level, mold level, and environmental toxins, huge factors. We can also do urine tests for that. Again, a kit shipped to your house, you do everything at home. It goes to an FDA registered lab, approved lab, and the report gets sent to me and we can take it from there. So
now Mark is saying no more tap water for me, only pop from now on.
Get rid of the pop too. Oh my goodness, do you know what's in pop?
What water do you think they use to make the pop?
And the pop actually, see, we're going to get on tangents, but Coca-Cola, for instance, no, not pushing down Coke, but there's multiple
leading
videos.
cola. It's a leading cola. Don't mention names, just in case.
Okay.
Allegedly.
So a cola. Sorry. Oops. But you can actually use it as a rust remover and cleaner for your sink. They've shown there's a lovely little like DNY, whatever the little company is that is just, they have little videos and what you can use to polish off your sink. It has rust removal in it. They have put things in Coke and it sat there undegraded for weeks. So I strongly urge you to find something to start replacing it with something else and then maybe getting rid of that. Coke is.
And if you like fizzy things, I just get like plain carbonated water, or they sell those little tanks now where you can like infuse a liquid with carbonation if you really want to, and just like do that with a little water and fruit juice, and like that gives you a nice little bubbly thing without, like with Coke or with leading colas and things like that. They have to put like certain things in it because otherwise it's such a sugar overload that normally you would get sick because there's so much sugar in it, and because of the acid and things that they put in, it makes it so your stomach can handle it. So it's just kind of, if it's going to make you sick if you have that much sugar at once, like, is it a good idea to begin with? But people do what they're going to do. So, just try to be as aware of as you can and moderate as much as you can.
It's not just cola, it's all the others.
He's messing with us now. And I was like, okay, no pop, just energy drinks.
Oh, well, I'm going to tell you to avoid the energy drinks too. There's natural things you can use for energy drinks. If you go to Whole Foods, there's I think the energy highball, it has a lot of sugar, but it has like guarana root in it. That's good for energy. There's do something natural as best as you can versus the really processed Red Bulls and all that. Monster drinks, those are terrible for you.
And what I would say is also get in touch, like we said, get in touch with the body and see what feels like to the body. And, if you're going to be picking between all these different drinks, maybe your body would desire something that's not an energy drink, or maybe it will. Who knows? But the big thing is making your choices out of conscious awareness. That's a huge part of it, because if you're not making it consciously and you're just kind of letting the robot do your shopping and go on autopilot, just being awake for the experience and responding instead of reacting is 90% of the battle. And then just continuing to educate yourself so you can have more information and make better and better choices, and connecting with the body. So you're bringing your body into the loop with what it would like.
Exactly.
Like I get crazy. No, now he's going to drink beer. All right.
I said beer was on the list. No beer.
Yeah, you got to go back and rewatch the whole episode now just to make sure you didn't miss anything. But at the end of the day, thank you everyone for being part of it. Thank you, Mark, for your comedy. I know you were just messing with us.
We appreciate it.
And if you have a particular topic you'd like to hear for next week, please mention it in the comments. We'd love to kind of take the conversations where everyone would like to go.
Yes.
But with that, all right, everyone, we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.